Wanted to share a little bit of an experiment that I did in the last couple of weeks. Actually, we at the European SharePoint conference this week, I wanted to showcase a really cool web part that was using SPFx and Teams, and I thought it would have been a great demo opportunity or a great sample on the GitHub. So wanted to kind of do a little bit of a walkthrough of this sample in this web part here. Who's that guy with the weird French accent? My name is Sébastien. I am the product lead at Valo Intranet. Been an MVP for the last 5 years now, mainly focusing on the client-side aspect of Office 365, so SharePoint framework, and then before that, anything JavaScript. And I wanted to literally go through really, really quickly a couple of slides, and then afterwards jump directly straight into the code. I don't want to bore you with slides today. You all want to see code. So I wanted to do just a quick introduction of why this is really cool. First of all, Teams development or SharePoint Framework web parts development within Teams has been available since SPFx 1.8. And this has, for me, literally changed the way I see a SharePoint Framework solution. It's not just a piece that you put on a page in SharePoint anymore. You can put that piece literally anywhere in your productivity suite, from SharePoint to Office add-ins now to even Microsoft Teams. So it's really, really powerful. The cool thing is that it's the same tooling. You don't have to relearn anything. And since SPFx 1.10, we've been able to even use it as a personal tabs. And this is where the game is totally changing for me. And I'm going to show you all those examples later today. First, how do you make that happen? You take your existing code. First, you migrate it to 1.10. So you use the Office 365 CLI. You migrate your code to SPFx 1.10. And in your JSON, in your web part manifest, you just add that you want to also have it as a Teams tab or as a Teams personal tab. And this is where all the magic happens, actually. Everything will automatically be inferred from these supported hosts. So let's go and see what does it mean from a code perspective. So if I'm going to my graph calendar here, so this sample that I'm currently showing, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see something. This sample is available as part of the SPDev framework web part sample. So it's called the React Graph Calendar, and all the instructions are right in here. So to come back to this later, but first, here we are saying that it is going to be supported as a SharePoint web part, as a Teams tab, and as a Teams personal app. This will make available this web part in those different areas that you might want to use it. So what it means that I can add this web part to a SharePoint page, to a Teams tab within a team, and to a personal tab or a personal app within your Teams client. So if we go and see what's the result of this, let me go here to, and I'm going to do this. I'm going to do Project Las Vegas, which is my thing here. And I'm going to go to Pages. And in the Pages, I'm going to go to Events. So in here, as you can see, I have a web part automatically loaded as part of the SPFx. I actually have it here. It's already loading from a local build of this web part. So it's all here. I'm just going to remove that. And here you can see I can go edit this page. I can add another version of that web part. So if I do graph calendar, I see the graph calendar from here. So it's really available as part of the surface right from here. What is great here is this could also be, it's not there yet, but that could be modified to loop into or hook into the calendar that lives on a communication site. So if you want to push it a little bit further and want to start with this starting point, one of the biggest missing feature of communication sites today are definitely the fact that there's no calendar view of the events list. And with this approach, you could really build something really cool. But here we have the February 2020. If I go back from 1 month to the other, I'm going to see other values. I can click here, and now I see, let me just go here. Now I see the actual information about the event, This one we see it's at 8 a.m. and then we see the time and everything. So that is a great scenario, but as we know, people are using Microsoft Teams more and more and more. So why don't we bring this actual calendar directly inside Microsoft Teams? And that's exactly what we can see here. So now I am in my Microsoft Teams team. I am in the general channel where I added the graph calendar, which is available as part of this here. So I can actually hit graph calendar. Automatically, I don't want to post to the channel. I'm going to hit save. I'm going to have a second graph calendar with that small parenthesis here. And here I say I want to be able to load 303 items at a time. And now automatically it's there. The best thing about it, it's exactly the same code that runs on both the SharePoint Online and the Teams things. And we're going to come back to the actual details around the code. What's new in SharePoint Framework 1.10 is the ability to take this exact same component, but to bring it to the personal level. So here we're at the team level. It needs to be part of this here. And this is cool, but sometimes you might want to have an app that is more persistent, that is always available as part of your Teams environment. And that's exactly what personal tabs are about. So if I go here and I go to the graph calendar here, this is an app that was deployed directly from our app catalog in SharePoint Framework. So the SharePoint Online app catalog, we synced the app to Teams, and now it's available because we said that it was possible to use it as a personal app. Now it is also available as a personal app right here. Depending on where we're at, actually I can pin it now. So that's a new feature of Microsoft Teams. So from now on, this graph calendar will always stick around. So if I go back to my Teams, as you can see, that graph calendar is always there. So I can just click on that and boom, we're back to the exact same UI. What is interesting, I don't know if you noticed, but it's not the same data. When I'm in a team, I actually hook up to the calendar that is attached to the current team. So I use the graph, talk with the current Teams calendar, and automatically I fetch the items. Here, I fetch the items of the user because it makes no sense to, I don't know, hard code a team or whatsoever. So here you have the ability to have all those elements right in there. Great maybe enhancement opportunity here is to also go and fetch all your joined teams calendars and make them part of this calendar. So you see not only your events, but your team events as part of a single dashboard. That could be extremely powerful to really have a good picture of what's happening around everything. So what is the code doing? So let's go back to Visual Studio here, and let's go to first a couple of things that I wanted to mention. So first, we're going to go to our web part class, which is kind of the entry point of this. First of all, we're just going to simply provision the graph calendar, which is my main component, where everything is being displayed and rendered. So we're going to go back this a little bit later. But there's a couple of things that we have to do initially to make sure that we have a well-working solution. First, we want to make sure that we are in Teams. If we're in Teams, or actually if we're in Teams, make sure that we have the Microsoft Teams SDK available. So if we are running within Microsoft Teams, this object will have a value. So if this object has a value, now we can actually get the context out of it. It used to be an async function. Now it's a direct object. So we just get the context from it. And this is what will provide information like channel name, team ID. So we can do some of the queries to the graph later on with the current context of Microsoft Teams. Also, something we want to do is to initialize the icons running on a surface that is hosted in SharePoint, but doesn't have all the bits and pieces in SharePoint, actually. So for example, the Office UI Fabric icons are not loaded by default in a SharePoint Framework web part that runs within Teams. So here you need to initialize the icons, and this is a function that is actually being provisioned as part of the Office UI Fabric React package. So you just need to call that function here and to see the icons, or it's not going to look good. You won't have a great experience if you're using the Office UI Fabric styles in your component. So this is kind of the only thing that happens on the web part side of things. But now, if you want to go to a little bit more stuff, what you're going to realize is that we are using this here. So the way I'm a very lazy developer. As I'm not coding as much as I used to, I don't have time to build amazing calendar components. The Office UI Fabric does not provide a calendar component either. So I had to go and find a nice calendar component that is open source and that we can use to build those. So what I did, I used a full calendar. The full calendar is a really, really, really nice library. I have it right here. So it's a fully JavaScript native calendar library that has versions for Vue, for Angular, for React. So it makes it really easy to leverage and to assemble a page with this. So basically, in that case, what is cool is that I don't have to build any of the calendaring components. The only thing I have to do is to provide data. And how do we provide data? Well, we have the Microsoft Graph to do that. Microsoft Graph is your perfect best friend to loop in some data from this team. So how do we do this? First, I'm going to come back to this here. We will load the events. When we render this component, we're going to load the events based on the calendar start date and the calendar end date. Why do we do that? Well, calendaring is really hard, especially in software engineering. It looks like a simple thing, but it's actually probably one of the worst things to play with. Dates and calendars are like my worst enemies here. And as you can see, I have the 26th of January, and at the end, I have the 7th of March. So I want to be able to do my query to the graph to include all of those dates. So my full view makes a sense, not just for the current month, but for the entire view that I have here. So that's what I'm doing here. Then I'm loading the events. I am using the, previous Microsoft Graph client. Sorry, Daryl. Hope you are coming with good news today. But here I'm using the previous client here. So I'm getting the client from the Graph Factory, and I'm simply building my URL. So in that case, /group ID. That group ID was provisioned through the context of Microsoft Teams. So Microsoft Teams has the information about which group ID we're currently working on. And then afterwards, I'm just here running the query where I'm doing a little bit of a filtering based on the start date and the end date. What are the different properties I'm looking for, and which is the version that I want to call from the graph, which in that case is the v1.0. Here, I am doing a little bit of a trick here. If I'm running as part of a personal tab, I want to run /me/events. So instead of going to the group calendar, I want to go to my personal calendar. The good thing here is that that was the only change that I had when I changed the code to go from SharePoint Framework 1.9 to 1.10. That's the only piece of code that I had to change. Just to add, can I check if I'm in a personal tab? And if yes, just override the setting here. And what is the way to check? Well, here, we're going to check if it's running in Teams, and that we don't have a Teams ID, then we are in a personal tab. How do we check if we're running in Teams? We're just checking if we have a Teams context that was passed as part of the initializer of our element. Something also that is really, really, really interesting that you can play with is to be fully aware of the current setup of your Microsoft Teams. So let me show you something that is really, really cool. In this scenario, I can go here. I can go in my settings, and I can change it to be dark. And now if I'm reloading the page, I'm just going to reload this one here. You're going to see that I now support dark mode natively within this web part. So that way, I'm a dark mode guy, so I had to. So how do we do that? Well, there are some interesting APIs that exist here. On the Teams context, you actually have access to the theme. So based on what we're doing, when you are running in Teams, we're importing, basically we're injecting on-demand CSS to the current web part that now runs in Teams. So you want to have a good example is in this case, I don't know, let's go back to SharePoint. When I'm in SharePoint, you see the colors here are the colors of the theme. In Teams, I want to have the blurple that is from Teams. So you really have to have those nice colors. So we are having an SCSS or a module here, which is the following here, which will bring some of the colors in there. Really, really, really simple CSS, really not that much, but at least we were able to do that. Same thing with dark. If we are running in a dark mode, then add this piece. In that case here, it's really simple. We're just using the F, so we're using the foreground color becomes white instead of gray, and this one, the today becomes this here. So at least when you're running inside Teams with a very, very small amount of code, you can really detect if you're in a dark mode or if you're not in a dark mode, and then apply it to your entire element in there. So that was what I wanted to showcase today. Well, actually, the last thing I wanted to show is how easy it is to work with full calendar. As you can see here, full calendar is actually just that. It just manages everything. It manages the events that were loaded initially through the Microsoft Graph. It manages the height, manages what happens on dates. When we resize, we can even make it fully responsive. So when I do that here, like it responsive-ish, let's go with responsive-ish, like it's actually pretty good. And finally, a couple of elements here. And then I'm also using some of the Office UI Fabric components, in that case, the panel, that when I'm here and I want to see the information here, it just pops up as a panel from the right where I see the data here. Here I could have an edit button, I could have more details to really make it more functional calendar item. So that makes it really, really powerful in a very, very, very low number of lines of code where I have like not even like 300 lines of code for my entire component that does fully work on the Microsoft Graph. So just before I hand it out to Al in that case, I wanted to come up with a couple of tips and tricks for you guys, and which is the following here. Just as a reminder, first, you can always understand the Teams context. That's the way that you know if you're running in Teams. The second thing, importing themes based on if you're in Teams or if you're in a dark mode of Teams, really useful when you're building cross-platform solutions. There's an interesting framework that is available, which is called the Fluent UI framework, which used to be called Stardust, which could be an interesting UI framework approach. The Stardust is what is being used within Microsoft Teams. So if you want to look into it, Microsoft Stardust GitHub, there you go. It's now called Fluent UI React, actually.
And yeah, so sorry, Sebastian, I'll jump on that one. So what we're doing is that we are basically gradually combining the classic Office UI Fabric, React, and then the Stardust, and they're basically now merged. Rather than having a competing set of libraries, exactly, we have one set of libraries across the Microsoft Traces.
And that's great because it means that basically based on your use case, you'll be able to go right or left, and then you have like really, really cool stuff that you're going to feel that are familiar to how you're actually building Microsoft, or you see Microsoft Teams. The cool thing is the chat messages. I think this is really, really cool. But yeah, so you can literally use the Fluent UI for this. Huge request for you guys, don't just use the web version of Microsoft Teams. Everything will work, and then you're going to go to the client and it won't. So please always test with the real thing. It makes everything way, way, way better. And if you want to make it just Teams enabled, you can always hide from the toolbox. So if you just want to use SPFx to build a nice Teams app, you can hide your web part from the toolbox. So in the end, It's going to make it a full Teams app with your own tool chain or toolkit, and it's going to make it way easier. So that's what I wanted to share today.
Great. Thank you, Sébastien. Awesome demo. Great to see that.